art is such a great tool for expression. And, when we think about mental health and how that connects to emotions, a lot of times people just do not have words for what they are feeling. And so that's a really great time to use art. I tell people like speech, like verbal speech is one particular way to communicate. And as a society, we have really elevated that as like the quote unquote best way to communicate, but it is one form of communication and there are tons of others. And so if you can't communicate how you're feeling with an emotion word, a song is fine, a picture is fine, a color is fine.
Welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. This is a show presented by Heart and Solutions Counseling Agency. We release new episodes every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central and encourage you to batch up that laundry, put away the dishes, plan for the week ahead, or do any other task that might seem daunting while you give our show a listen. You might just be encouraged to call your therapist, connect with this week's guest, or seek out those services you've been considering for a while but haven't made the commitment to yet. If you are in the state of Iowa and are in need of mental or behavioral health counseling, give us a call at 1-800-531-4236. Enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Dr. Julie Johnson. I'm the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions, mental health counseling and behavioral health counseling here in Iowa.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt. I am our vice president in charge of the behavioral health department. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are a podcast designed for people curious about counseling, but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
Our guest today is a return guest. We've got Jayden Aubryn here with us today. Jayden is a Black, queer, non-binary psychotherapist, personal trainer, and consultant. They specialize in holistically healing trauma by integrating mental, physical, sexual, and spiritual health. They're passionate about increasing accessibility and decolonizing therapy by promoting healing via food, music, movement, and art. Welcome back, Jayden. Great to see you.
I'm so happy to be back. Thanks for having me again.
We really enjoyed our first conversation with you. And in fact, we enjoyed our conversation with you so much that I ended up becoming a consulting client of yours shortly after the episode. We had a situation here and I said, gosh, I need some mentoring. I need some support and some different ways of thinking about what's going on. And so we reached out to you and you did some consulting with us, which I found very helpful. So I love talking to somebody who I can legitimately say, hey, this is a helpful service that you're providing when you're doing this consulting. So I just want to say thank you so much for that. And it's just great to talk to you again.
Yeah, thanks so much for trusting me with that. It was an honor.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about what's been new for you. What's been going on since the last time we talked?
Okay, yeah. So a lot of updates. The biggest one is probably that I moved to Spain. So I am running my business from abroad. And I also opened up a second business. So I have Tice Consulting and Therapy, of course, and then I opened up Chaotic Healing, which is more into the holistic health coaching, personal training, and then like case management services, accountability services. And I'm partnering with someone to help with all of that. So it's been really fun to expand my one-on-one services that way. But yeah, also a lot of bigger things. I'm planning a retreat for mental health professionals in the fall. I just became an author, a writer for Brains magazine. So I'll be publishing some articles with them. And I'm working on some research right now. So I'm partnering with the University of Minnesota to do some research on how certain types of exercises and movements impact your mental health, hopefully so that more therapists are able to say like do this particular type of exercise or do this movement in this way for this particular symptom. So a lot's going on.
Yeah, a lot is going on. That was a lot. Okay, so starting with personal training, I know we talked about beforehand that we didn't really get into that much, more of like your counseling part of your TICE consulting and counseling. Can you kind of go into more about what chaotic healing is and what you offer and personal training part of that as well?
Yeah, yeah. So chaotic healing is really leaning into the holistic health realm of things. I think, as a therapist, there are just some limitations of things that I'm able to talk about with clients, and also kind of what their expectations are for the service, right? Like they're really consenting to talk therapy. So while I can integrate other things like that still has to be the main modality is talk therapy. So with holistic health coaching, I get to lean a bit more into the nutrition, movement, spiritual side of things, sexual side of things, and really get to explore things with clients in a way that feels a bit more authentic to them, especially if they felt like traditional talk therapy hasn't been um, as helpful or they want something a bit more interactive or more directive. It also allows me to work with people internationally, which is, of course, relevant for me now. And then, yeah, so I'm doing that. And then personal training, of course, in person here in Spain, but also virtual and asynchronous options. So if we can't meet at the same time, I will program workouts for you and then just have you record certain things and give you feedback. And then my co-founder of that, they are a ADHD coach, and have a certification with that. So they're doing ADHD coaching, and case management, and the accountability services. They're really passionate about the neurodivergent spectrum. So they focus mostly on that.
Wow, that's amazing. So I love that you're bringing those counseling skills that you're using as a psychotherapist and really expanding them out to provide more access, greater access for everybody, regardless of geography and regardless of what, there are limitations to psychotherapy. There's geographical, like physical barriers, there's insurance barriers, there's scope of practice barriers. There are a lot of barriers to direct counseling. And so I love that you are expanding that out. And I'm super interested in this research that you're doing with the University of Minnesota. Can you tell us more about that? What are you studying and what are you finding?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I was getting my while studying to become a personal trainer, which I always like to say, I thought that personal trainers were just gym bros, but it took like legit studying, like medical concepts. It was a very detailed and nuanced. So I'm learning about, all of these biological and medical systems in the body and how they respond to movement and nutrition. And, know a bit about the body, right, as a somatic therapist. And so as I'm learning about it from a physical training standpoint, I'm seeing all of these connections and intersections. And one thing that really interested me was power training. So essentially, power training is how quickly you can move a large amount of weight. So if you see those Olympic lifts where people are like throwing really huge barbells above their head very quickly and then standing up, like that's a power move. Jumps are a form of power. And power really relies on neural connections. It's not as much about muscle fibers and all of that. Like, obviously, muscles are involved, but to train it, you actually have to train your neural connections. And I'm thinking, okay, well, brain neural connections, like I deal with that all the time. And so I'm reading more and more about this. And essentially, I'm realizing that I think there might be some big implications here between how power training could affect executive functioning skills. And so that's what I'm studying. And right now I'm working on the literature review because there's not a lot of research out there about power training specifically. You'll see stuff about aerobic capacity or Tai Chi or exercise and physical capacity in general. But what I'll be doing is I'll be assessing people's executive functioning symptoms, and then I'll be running a group of power training and then a different group of strength training, and then just a control group, of course. And we're going to see if there's any statistically significant differences.
Interesting. And I know you talked about like learning how like the movements affect mental health. And obviously you just said power training is a lot with your brain as well and how that affects being able to power train. Have you, I know you're probably just starting your research there, but like learned anything with the mental health aspect affecting power training and if they have good or bad mental health, how that's affected weightlifting in general?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's actually already a decent amount of research. I was like shocked. I was studying for this certification, and it straight up says in the textbook, if the people's like mood is low, if they're not focused, concentrating, like if there are other stressors going on, it affects their ability to do movement, right? And they talked a lot about the energy of if you're feeling down, your posture is probably going to change. And if your posture then changes, then you'll have different biomechanics when you're trying to do an exercise. So it does affect your mood, does affect your ability to do exercises. Well, then, the inverse, I'm assuming, might be true, right? That exercise, would affect your mood. So, there is already definitely research out there saying this, but I find it to be very vague. It says exercise is good for your mental health. Okay, like cool. There's so many different types of exercises though. And if we can get specific about the type of exercise that can improve your mood and mental health in certain ways, then I think it becomes a bit more accessible to someone. Because if I say, oh, just exercise for your mental health, and someone thinks that means running, they're not going to do it, right? If they might not want to do it if they don't like running. But if I can say that means um getting up and down off the ground in creative ways, or hovering over the couch right before you sit down for 5 seconds and then fully sitting down, right? That might be a bit more accessible, and then more people can use movement to improve their mental health and feel really empowered in their choices and how to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think exercise for a lot of people feels like a bad word, right? Like it feels like, oh, I when I hear that word, I feel guilt, right? Like, oh, I should be doing more. And then when we hear things like, well, it's good for your mental health to get out and exercise, then sometimes that can feel like, oh, well, then it's my fault, right? If I'm having mental health symptoms, it's my fault because I'm not out there running. I'm not out there, going to Zumba and doing powerlifting. So I love that you're looking at the specifics of it, the mechanics of it, to be able to say, yeah, even these kind of daily movements or just different ways of doing what we're already doing. Because I think a lot of times, too, when it comes to exercise, it can feel like time, right? Time away from the kids and time away from work to be able to do these things. And when you're looking at, oh, there are benefits to in everyday movements. When you're sitting, you're going to sit down on the couch anyway, right? We might as well do it in this way because you're going to get that little extra boost. And when that boost is measurable, that becomes even more motivating because we can see it. It's so easy to diminish those small changes, those small movements in our life and feel like, well, it's not going to matter anyway.
Exactly. And, I think a lot of us, just like you're saying, we have such a bad relationship with exercise, but exercise is like a very specific thing, right? And there's like a definition about it, and there's a way to exercise where like you're pushing yourself to like a certain intensity and then resting in a certain way. And that's one tiny like thing under the umbrella of movement. And we all move throughout the day, unless you are fully paralyzed, right? This is the one exemption, right? We're all moving throughout the day. And so, how can we use movement to be beneficial? And I think that, you know, as we talk about mental health and somatics and trauma, a lot of the what the field is moving towards is like, let's get into the body, right? Let's build a better relationship with the body. But that's really, really hard when the only thing we associate moving our body with is exercise, which then comes with fat phobia and shame and possibly injury and memories of having to run a mile in front of your peers when you're 12 and stinky. Like that doesn't have to be the only way. And just like there are different ways to move your body for different fitness goals, there are different ways to move your body for different mental health goals. And so I think that having that shift so people can find a different way and a more healthy way to relate to movement and instead of exercise is how we start to get people to be in touch with their body, right? How do you make it fun and accessible and not like re-traumatizing?
Is there now? I know that you mentioned that you just moved to Spain, and I know you've been kind of around to different cultures and different places. I'm just curious from your perspective, do you see a difference culturally when it comes to exercise and movement between some of the cultures that you've been immersed in?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Spain is okay. I don't want to like speak too much like an expert. I've lived here for about 8 months. But from what I've seen so far, in the one city that I'm in, which is Valencia, is a very active city. It's a very active culture. There's green spaces and bike trails and walking trails everywhere. Is one of the reasons I want to move here. Is just green spaces and biking everywhere. And every few blocks there's a playground for kids, or they'll have like little playgrounds with workout equipment, just like calisthenics or like basic workout equipment, just like throughout the city. And it's also just more of a mobile place, right? There's really good busing and everything's really walkable. So, I don't have a car, so I'm just moving my body more, walking more, busing more, biking more. Yeah, it's just a much more active city, and I think that um, people like the idea of just like moving around is just more what it is. Now there are definitely like lots of gyms and people who work out a lot here too, but I think movement is more a part of the culture here than I would say like in the United States, especially. Actually I've lived in smaller towns, bigger cities, suburbs, wherever. Like movement is not really part of the culture. Exercise might be part of the culture depending on where you are and who you are, but general movement is not as integrated. So that would be the biggest difference, I would say.
Yeah, and it probably makes it so over in Spain, like it's not as much of a like taboo topic with exercise because they're used to moving more. Do you, not that you know, as of course you said you're not an expert, but like why do you think that is where in America it's not so common to be, I don't know, we don't have parks everywhere and people aren't going on walks everywhere. We have to have cars most of the time when we live here. So the difference with the movement here versus in Spain, for example.
Yeah, my informed assumptions here and guesses are that one, like Spain in Europe is just a bit older. So it was built when there weren't cars. And it was built where people just kind of had to walk everywhere. And so as things have been modernized, I think that has remained part of the culture versus by the time America is really being founded, there's already at least like horses and buggies, and that infrastructure was there from the get-go. And then, America, especially after World War II, very big leader in industrialization and technology and all that technology like leading to convenience and all that's a very American thing, right? And the free market then leading to all of this competitive like technology and convenience and like just stay at home and be comfortable. That was a very American thing and became part of the quote unquote like American dream in the 60s and 70s. And while that has dispersed to other countries for sure, I think that it being like America being the epicenter of that has really made it so that we have grown up and prioritized comfort and convenience over just kind of the realities of like moving and cooking takes longer and transiting takes longer and there's not always elevators, and um, yeah, I would say just yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing. I think there's a lot of other like systematic nuances there, but that's a very different conversation.
Yeah. So I also know that in your second business, your new business, Chaotic Healing, you're focusing on the movement part, but you're also focusing on art, which I find really interesting, and music. So can you tell me more about how art and music also play a role in mental health?
Oh yeah, yeah. So I originally went to school to be a music therapist. Yeah, so I have always been a musician. I've been playing piano since I was 5. And I've learned like 5 other instruments over my lifetime, but like love music, love art, just a very creative person ever since childhood. And so I have my own personal like relationship with like art and how that's healing and expressive. And then of course there are like actual fields of this of music therapy, art therapy, drama therapy, etc. But art is such a great tool for expression. And, when we think about mental health and how that connects to emotions, a lot of times people just do not have words for what they are feeling. And so that's a really great time to use art. I tell people like speech, like verbal speech is one particular way to communicate. And as a society, we have really elevated that as like the quote unquote best way to communicate, but it is one form of communication and there are tons of others. And so if you can't communicate how you're feeling with an emotion word, a song is fine, a picture is fine, a color is fine, and so that's like base level stuff, but then you can also get into the neuroscience and physiology, right? Like colors affect us. UV rays, which are a color, right? It's on the color spectrum, cause cancer. We know colors affect us. Like all colors on the color spectrum affect us. Music, it lights up our entire brain. So when certain parts of the brain shut down, maybe because we're feeling really emotional, music can light it back up and also enhance neuroplasticity, right? There are so many ways that art actually affects our biology and physiology, and you can use that information to, again, make small adjustments throughout your day of what playlist are you going to listen to on the way home from work? What color outfit are you going to wear that day? That kind of stuff.
So, did you ever pursue like actually practicing music therapy then? I know you said you started going to school for that. And what is the difference then with normal talk therapy and how you could use music or art in your therapy? I know you kind of said some art stuff right there too, but I just know I don't know if we've talked about music therapy too much on this podcast. So, like, what is the difference there?
Yeah, so music therapy is a super broad field, just like occupational therapy or physical therapy. Like there's so many different implications. But honestly, right now, at least, it's not right now. Okay, when I was going to school and studying it back in like 2012, um, I don't think there was a really big focus on using music therapy for mental health. It was kind of there, but I think because insurance doesn't cover it, it just wasn't really a thing. You often saw it more in nursing homes or with like children with developmental disabilities, pain management, Parkinson's disease and other autoimmune disorders. Like you would see it a lot in those settings. Um, but I mean, really, music therapy can be used for anything. I remember there was a really big incident that got like music therapy on the map where Senator Gabby Gifford got shot in the head and lost the ability to speak. But through music therapy and the enhanced neuroplasticity, she learned how to speak again by starting with singing. Because even if you can't speak, you can hum and you can sing because the musical application is different neurologically. And slowly they took away the music until she was singing a cappella and then was able to just take that speech and develop like actual speech patterns, right? Like amazing things that we can do with the brain. So there are a lot of implications, but unfortunately, yeah, I haven't seen as much of music therapy related to like mental health psychotherapy work. A lot of the music I see in the mental health world is a lot more indigenous sound healing, and a lot of those principles. And again, more of that like expressive side of like using playlist and all of that. That's where we have most of the research.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think between art, either experiencing art or creating art, using art as a means of communication and expression. And I think that the idea of being able to receive art as communication, whether it's the movement of doing the art, or the art that is being produced and put out there, the ability to read art, right? The ability to read music, is it's not a very often practiced skill, but I think we kind of intuitively can do some of it, but we're not always intentional about it. So we might see that our child or our partner or our coworker or our friend is listening to a certain song, and we might put together just from patterns, hey, oh, that's right, this playlist is on, or this song is on, like what's happening today, right? What happened? And so we can kind of intuitively put those things together, but we're not always being intentional about what kinds of music we are exposing ourselves to, what kind of music is helpful to us, or what kind of music might not be helpful to us in certain situations. And we're not always being intentional about noticing that in the people around us as well. So I love the idea of just being more intentional about that. And then art too. I mean, how validating is it? And we see it with kids sometimes, right? But not so much with adults. So how validating is it when a child shows us a piece of art and we are actually curious about it? Like we actually ask them about it. We care about what they're saying and what they're expressing through what they've drawn to us. And I think that we see that more in younger children, where adults are more open to being intentional about what's being communicated, because with younger children, we don't have as much of the ability to express ourselves with them, or for them to express themselves to us through words. And so we kind of accept art a little bit more, I think, in younger children than we do in adults, but it's just as important in adults, that we allow ourselves to express ourselves that way, and that we are open and intentional about being curious about that with other adults.
Yeah, it's something I say all the time is that we act like adult humans are a completely different species than children. And it's like, no, if it works for kids, like it's probably going to have some like valid basis for adults too. And I think a lot of like healing is getting over ourselves and allowing ourselves to have fun and be goofy and be weird, just like we would as kids.
Yeah, I mean, the playgrounds aren't just for the kids, right? When we're up there and we're doing movement like that, because the thing is, my last now that it's getting warmer here in Iowa, right? My daughter and I go to the playground at night now from like 7 to 8. And when she's on the monkey bars, she's not thinking like, all right, I got to do another couple reps, right? I've got to do another I got to hang a couple more times, then I'll go down this pole and I'll run up here to this slide and I'll do 10 more reps of that. There, none of that inner dialogue that goes through my head, right? When I'm exercising, none of that goes through her head. She's like, yes, got the next one. Okay, getting the next one, right? And so she's experiencing that movement in such a joyful way. And you're right, we feel like we've grown out of it. We feel like, well, now that I'm 40, right, I can't be doing the monkey bars and climbing up on the thing. And it's like, no, we can be, right? And so when I'm at the playground at 7 p.m., nobody's around, right? So there we go, we're up there. But there is a stigma about what kinds of movements are appropriate for children versus adults, right? When a child sits on the floor in the middle of a store, nobody really thinks about it, right? But if you're an adult and you listen to your body and you go, oh, it would feel very comfortable right now to sit on this ground, we don't do it. We fight it, right? Because we have to act like grown-ups. And I think the same is true for art. We get to a certain point and we go, oh, my art's not good now, because now we're comparing it with other places. We're going, oh, this wouldn't be hung up in a gallery, so it's not good. And we think that way, and we can be intentional and we can say, no, the process of art is a joyful process, or it's a sorrowful process, or it's a transitional process. We can focus on the process if we're more intentional, and we can focus on what we're trying to express, what we want to express to ourselves and to other people. I think it's just beautiful, kind of going back to those things that really did, maybe bring us joy when we were children, and accepting those other pieces other than just talking as valid communication. It's not childish communication. It is valid, expressive communication. I think we can all be a little more intentional about that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think it's one of those things where a lot of people will say, I just don't know how to do that. Or like, I don't know how to say that. I don't know how to, incorporate that. I'm like, yes, you do. You absolutely do. But for some reason, you're not willing to, right? I don't know how to say I don't want to go. Say I don't want to go. Like absolutely, you just said it, right? I don't know where I would wear this outfit any like put it on and then you are wearing it, right? We get in our ways all the time. Obviously, we want to assess for, is it going to be more helpful or harmful? I think there are certain realities of being an adult, right? Like if you're at work and if you do too many social faux pas that like you're going to get fired and then risk meeting your basic needs. Okay, like that's a completely different situation and we want to keep that in mind, but I think that there are a lot more opportunities than people really give credit for. Um, and I don't know, like, let's just challenge each other to be goofier. Like, people who are like normal, quote unquote, normal to me, I'm like, what does that mean? Like, get weird, get goofy. Like, that's how you connect with people. That's how you have fun. I think the world can be really stressful and hopeless sometimes, feeling hopeless, and then we're just choosing not to engage with the joy. Like, oh, come on. Yeah, like let's get weird together. Let's make healing fun. And if someone side eyes you, like that's their problem.
Yeah, and when we're thinking about behaviors and we're doing that decision making process, and we're going, okay, I want to wear this outfit, and I'm concerned about, is this going to be helpful to me or harmful to me? As long as I'm not harming somebody else with this, right? Then, oh my goodness, let's be willing to be wrong too. Let's try it and be willing to be wrong. And so, if I'm going, okay, this might be harmful to me because people might not like what I'm going to be wearing, right? Or they might not like that I'm setting this boundary on my time. Let's be willing to be wrong. We can sometimes very automatically think this is going to be harmful to me, right? It's going to be harmful to me to set the boundary or establish the boundary that I need to establish, or to make the choice that's best for me and my mental health and my physical health and my spiritual health. It can feel like automatically, nope, that's going to be harmful. And let's be willing to be wrong. Let's be willing to go, okay, this could be helpful to me. And if I think it might be helpful to me and I wear the outfit or I set the boundary and I realize, oh no, I was wrong, that is okay. We can do those risky things, and we can recover from them if we are secure in ourselves, in our resilience. And I think that resilience piece, if we have the skill of resilience and we have confidence in our resilience, it allows us to take those bigger risks, and to say, yeah, this could be harmful to me. I could lose my job if I say to my boss, hey, I am not working this weekend. I cannot work this weekend, right? It's my cousin's wedding. I'm not working. Yeah, it could be harmful to me and I could lose my job. But if I am secure in my ability to have resilience, if I'm secure in my skills to be able to be okay, if that harm that I'm afraid of does come to me, then I can take that risk. I'm more willing to stand up for myself or set that boundary for myself when I know that I have that resilience within me.
And I think that's like a really big challenge in growing up, right? Because that right there is not true when you're a child, right? If the people that you are annoying and upsetting as a child get too angry, like your survival is at risk. You don't have autonomy. You don't have the ability to just figure it out. Like you are dependent on other adults. And so I think, we all grow up learning in our nervous system, learning that we have to acquiesce to other people's desires. And again, as a kid, that can be more helpful for survival. But as an adult, that's not true. And so it's about bringing awareness to this instinct to do what other people are doing, right? Because it makes sense that that's our instinct. It makes sense that that's what our body's going to want to do. And we can use our developing or fully developed prefrontal lobes to say, actually, I'm going to be fine. Actually, I do have enough resilience and support to get through this. And it's just taking that moment to challenge these thoughts and these feelings and then getting some data. Okay, I did the weird thing, I did the goofy thing, I set the boundary, I communicated directly, and no one died. Maybe I can do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I would love to hear more about your consulting too. I know Julie mentioned at the beginning that she's used you for consulting. What kind of topics do people usually reach out for consulting? And if someone's listening, like knowing like that would be a good service for them to use.
Yeah, I would say the two uh gosh the overarching categories I would say are diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then mental health, right? So I have a lot of marginalized identities and lived experiences. So I have that perspective, but then that also means I work with a lot of people with various identities and lived experiences. And so whether I like it or not, like, or plan to or not, like, I have a lot of professional experience, like being working with trans people. I never set out to be a therapist that specializes in trans care, but because I use they them pronouns and identify as trans, I got a whole bunch of trans clients. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm gonna have to figure this out and do some continuing education. And now, I try to offer that to others as well from a professional standpoint and then also a personal standpoint. Um, but then yeah, the other main thing that I consult on is mental health presentations. And so usually things around, trauma, personality disorders, psychosis, and like eating disorders, and then also a bit of like the intersection of like mental health and like chronic illness and how like chronic illness and complex medical conditions can affect one's mental health. And I think that I come from my approach is just I would say not mainstream. And I think you know, there are plenty of other providers who do similar things that I do. Maybe they focus a little bit more on one thing. Yeah, I don't like to focus. I just like to do it all, right? So there's plenty of other providers who might focus on one thing or the other. But I don't think it's a mainstream thing in the mental health world right now. So I'm often consulting with others on how do we bring some of these more alternative, holistic methods in care when all the traditional stuff is not working. And so I'll do that one on one, or I also do a lot of trainings and conferences. I spoke at two national conferences in the past year. And yeah, I'm doing trainings probably about at least once every other month. That's about the cadence right now on these topics. It's usually healing through either movement, food, art, music, or BDSM. Those are kind of the main things that I will train on.
as you talk about the consulting and also the your ties consulting and therapy, you talk about healing through food as well, and you talk about spiritual health. You talk about sexual health. There are a lot of different pieces, and I think that the idea that somebody might say, yeah, I want to come for consulting or I want to come for treatment because I want to work on my relationship with food, for example, right? All of those other pieces are going to eventually tie in with the presenting challenge. And so I just find it really great that you're able to and willing, I guess willing because right, anybody could be able to, anybody could make themselves able to, right, through education and study. But it's that willingness, I think, to go to those places with your clients, to follow kind of that stream with your clients and be able to say, yeah, we can talk about sexual health, we can talk about spiritual health, because it is going to tie in. It's all you. we're one entity, and these are all just pieces of ourselves, and they're going to tie in together.
Yeah, and I think that's where, as a profession, talking more, that's why I love doing trainings and consulting for other professionals, right? Because we have to understand our own biases and our own triggers with all that kind of stuff. If you are a therapist and sex makes you uncomfortable, or like talking about sex makes you uncomfortable, it's going to be really, really difficult to then talk about that with a client, right? And that makes sense, right, as a limitation. And also, that really is not fair for the client. And I think we should honor our limitations, like first and foremost, but like, just in general, just knowing that like that's a huge umbrella category that a lot of people have trauma around. There's a lot of spiritual and religious trauma in the world. There's, as we talked about earlier, movement trauma and food trauma with like diet culture. And so for many, many reasons, you know, a mental health professional may or may not have like a solid understanding or grasp on their own particular trauma, let alone have gone through the healing process of all of that. So then to ask them to hold all of those many traumas for another client, for another human being, that like actually is a lot, especially when we're not particularly trained to do that, right? When we go through our masters and graduate programs, we're trained to keep things very heady, like very just disconnected from our body and in this cognitive level. So you really have to have a lot of support to go above and beyond to like get into the body and understand how you as a professional relate to all of these things, and then how to translate that into your work with clients in any given point of your journey. And, I'm not blaming any individual therapist on not being able to do this. I really think that this is a systemic thing, and we need more training in our graduate programs and more professionals who are offering like trainings that address these types of things specifically, because, no one heals from trauma without support, and that includes the therapist as well.
Yeah, and when we think about, because you mentioned food trauma and exercise trauma, but when we think about sexual trauma, a lot of times we think about sexual assault, or sexual assault as a child, sexual assault as an adult, as being sexual trauma. And absolutely, that is sexual trauma. But as humans, we experience sexual trauma that we might not know is sexual trauma, that we might not, process intellectually as, oh, I had this traumatic sexual experience. And when we can't see it that way because we're so focused on, well, I haven't been sexually assaulted, so I haven't had sexual trauma, right? When we're focused on that, then we can miss those pieces of our sexual identity, and those pieces that maybe need some healing or processing that we might not be aware of. And so for therapists who are working with clients, I think there's a couple barriers. There's one that that because there isn't very much training or or discussion in graduate programs about sexual trauma other than sexual assault, right? That providers sometimes don't feel equipped, but also that providers are not equipped to process their own sexual traumas, to be able to help work with somebody else. And then I think the other thing is that we are in graduate school. The one thing, if you take one thing out of graduate school, is do not have a sexual relationship with your clients, right? That is like the number one, like, no. And so I think that because that is, and it should be repeated all the time. However, I think that it makes providers sometimes very wary of having conversations with clients about their sexual experiences, about their sexual trauma, and about their sexual identities as a person, because and how it relates with their relationships, because there's kind of this feeling of I can't go there professionally because we've been trained so much like we don't have a sexual relationship. So, what might you say to a therapist that kind of has that stigma or that thought process going?
Yeah, I usually start with what is the fear, right? Because we need to address the fear and establish safety, or else the body's not going to let us go any further, right? So, what is your fear? And having this conversation, what are your concerns? What are, once we have those things, what are the evidence for those things? Like, is there something that the client is doing that's really like, yeah, I'm actually like super concerned about this behavior, and then we need to like address that? Or is it more of an anxiety, right? And then we can plan for that, right? Let's identify green flags and red flags, the saying that like we're going down the path that you fear. And here are some, guardrails or boundaries that you can put in place to, make sure that you're staying safe and within your window of tolerance. And again, we're not going into a dangerous territory. And then as long as all of that's checking out, right? Your guardrails are in place. We got all the green flags, no red flags are creeping up. Okay. Then we got to work on your distress tolerance and managing your own anxiety so that you can start to engage um with these conversations with the client. And we might talk about what conversations do they feel ready for first, right? Because we don't need to have the hardest conversation right away. Let's have like, an easier conversation for that therapist, gain some confidence in their ability to have these conversations and some data, right, with their body. And then kind of going from there, saying like, okay, that conversation went well or it didn't went well or go well. So what do we do? What adjustments do we need to make? And yeah, I think it's just, making sure we're establishing safety, addressing concerns, and then figuring out what is the most accessible pathway forward for the clinician. And I'm sure that probably doesn't sound super different than, what we might do for clients. And it's because again, we're all humans and we all kind of respond to similar things. And we need to be safe, like that first and foremost as a species. Like we need to feel safe, and then we can move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you mentioned you have a retreat coming up in October that's working with mental health professionals, right? Can you give us some info on that, where it's taking place, what will be happening during that, how people can learn more about it and sign up?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's basically everything that we were just talking about today. So it's a 7 day, 6 night retreat. But only 5 of those days are going to be, super focused on the learning piece of it. There will be 25 credits of continuing education. And so the first day we're going to just be focusing on like how trauma affects the body and how that relates to bias and systemic oppression, and a bit on decolonizing therapy. And then we'll have a day on movement and movement for healing. And so essentially, like there will be a educational piece in the morning, and then a workshop, interactive workshop in the afternoon. And then, yeah, we'll have a day on food, a day on music and art, and then a day on BDSM, and then ethics around like, you know, dealing with like niche communities and that kind of stuff. And so that's kind of like the educational component. But outside of that, there's going to be daily yoga and walks and meditation. There's a pool. It's in Spain. It's on the eastern coast of Spain. I think on average it says like 262 days of sun a year. So very Mediterranean environment. It's pretty much always like in between like 60 and 70 degrees here and sunny. It's really lovely. There's gardens, and beautiful walking trails. So a lot of that nature component, healing component. I'm bringing in a yoga instructor and also a person who does sound healing, and I'm seeing if they'll also offer some Reiki, but TBD there. And then of course a few like group activities like wine tasting and game nights and arts and crafts nights and all of that kind of stuff. So definitely a retreat to like relax and heal, but also we're going to talk about like how to take these principles and heal for yourself and also for your clients. Oh, and then
Wonderful.
also if you're interested in that and listening to this, it'll be going live. The waitlist to sign up will be going live this Friday on April 11th on my website at ticeconsultingandtherapy.com.
So exciting. Wow. And is this your first conference that you've put together or retreat that you've put together?
It is my first retreat that I've put together, so I'm really excited. I'm very lucky that my partner with this retreat has done a lot of event management and put together a lot of things. So definitely asking them a lot of questions. And the yoga instructor has also done quite a few retreats. So I have some experts on board with me. But yeah, this is my first one that I'm leading.
That is what an exciting experience, and having that in Spain, I think, just really adds such a great exciting component to it. So I know that all of the attendees are going to have a great time. I think that sounds amazing. So we just love talking to you. We just love having you on the show. I was chatting Chrissa the whole time, like, sorry, I'm taking your turn. But we just really enjoy talking with you. So thank you so much for being here, Jayden. We really appreciate it. We know too, it's great to know that when we do have those consulting needs, that you are out there doing this work, and that we are able to go to you for support and for your just wealth of knowledge as it comes to all the different aspects of a situation that may be at play. I think that is one of your greatest strengths, is putting together pieces, connecting things that maybe on the surface don't look connected. So I just think it's beautiful what you're doing. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Wonderful. So, yes, TISE Consulting, TISE Consulting and Therapy. And you also have a Patreon. So if you search for TISE Consulting and Therapy, or yes, TISE Consulting and Therapy on Patreon, you can find Jayden there. And then Chaotic Healing is the holistic coaching consulting service as well. Very excited to learn more about that.
For sure. I'm Jayden Aubryn and I need a counselor.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the You Need a Counselor podcast. We are so grateful that you're here. Now, we want to hear from you. Text us or give us a call at 515-650-3231. You can also find and connect with You Need a Counselor on Facebook and Instagram. If you've enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to like, review, or leave a comment, as all of these things help others to find and benefit from the podcast as well. If you're in the state of Iowa and interested in mental health counseling or behavioral health intervention services, give us a call at 800-531-4236.